Netflix's Ugly, an adaptation from the novel by Scott Westerfeld, has been in development for a couple of years. Now it's arriving on the streamer. It shares vibes with other YA-themed dystopian stories. But does it offer anything new? In a futuristic world that imposes cosmetic surgery when people turn 16, Tally is eager for her turn to join the rest of society. But when a friend runs away, Tally embarks on a journey to save her that upends everything she thought she wanted. Joey King stars in this as Tally, a girl who's counting down the days until she can get her surgery to make her a pretty, reconfiguring her body and her looks so that she can fit in with the rest of the pretty society. Now, the premise, I think, is kind of hilarious. We're given background exposition right from the start, talking about how wars and all sorts of ecological devastation came about. So the natural solution was to make everybody look awesome so there wouldn't be any jealousy or inferiority complexes, which then lead to hurt feelings and inadequacies, creating fear, which then leads to anger, then hate, and you guessed it, suffering. According to the beginning lore, despite the utopian outlook that if everyone could be good-looking, then the problems would all fade away, there were still discrepancies and access issues, leading to just another caste system of the pretties and then the uglies. I don't know what this means. Well, basically, this was just illustrating simply that human nature has doomed us to an ongoing cycle of issues. But once you get past that, the movie follows the path of other YA adaptations that came before it. I mean, think Divergent or The Hunger Games. The haves live in their shiny places while the have-nots are relegated to a monotone existence until they can reach the age where they're then granted entry into the world of the haves. And with that comes strife and longing, which is what we see happen in the case of Tally as she can't wait to get into the world that lays just across the river. Now, the plot itself is simple, especially as Tally gets a taste of the pretty life and then is forced into a task before her operation can begin. From there, it's an infiltration-type rescue scenario. Find her friend and gain intel on the rebels that the friend is shacking up with. And for as straightforward as this is, the story, it works at a basic level. It's not complex or deep, but the adventure part of it, combined with the small amount of suspenseful tension, however obvious and even predictable as it was, it kept me entertained to see where the story was going to take us. But the journey there, it's a bit of a rough one. Now, maybe it is because I had an advanced screener, so I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt and say that perhaps the visual effects weren't completely finalized. I say that because, wow, they were terrible. Part of the journey involves Tally learning to ride a hoverboard, which I thought was pretty cool. And the training montage, it was fun, especially with all the wipeouts and the crashes that we get to watch. But when she's out riding around, once she's all solidified on it, it's so clearly green screen that it was distracting. Now, I genuinely hope that I wasn't seeing the finalized effects. If I did, then they're probably going to break you out of the illusion of the narrative as well. Which I think it's a shame, because for a portion of the hoverboard journey, it's wild, even containing some nail-biting sequences. And something else that was a little distracting was with the pretties. They're supposed to be basically perfect. No blemishes on their skin or any wonkiness to their appearance at all. But the ones we see look like they were attacked by some Instafilter, smoothing out the skin so that it went way past believable or convincing and then went straight to comical. Now, maybe some of it was CGI to smooth out and recontour faces, but I'd also guess that a ton of makeup was just piled onto the actors' faces so that they could have that photoshopped smoothness. Now, again, I do know what they were going for. They almost achieved it, but then got carried away and progressed to ridiculous. They were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. I'll answer for them. They shouldn't have. Through the story, there are rumors of rebel factions and also a devious villain. Unfortunately, the villain is so plain and generic that they're just uninteresting. And that's not even because their entire nefarious plan is predictable. We just don't get enough time with them to allow for depth. Now, I do appreciate the lore and the background that we receive through some exposition. It's relayed in a natural way, so to be told about the baddie by somebody else just didn't feel forced. And to the film's credit, even though the villain is vanilla, there are stakes surrounding the interactions with them and other characters. And I appreciate that there was peril, even a shocking moment or two. These surprises, they were nice. Now, I think these moments would have been even more impactful, though, had we received more time with the characters. mean, I think to the character of Gale in the Hunger Game movies, he was meant to create conflict with Katniss and her emotions, which then would transfer to us as the audience. But we get so little time with him. And again, I'm only speaking for the film, not the novel, that, I never actually even rooted for Gale and Katniss to get together. I mean, he was just some dude who ended up being a surrogate big brother. And we get that with Chase Stokes' character Paris in Uglies. He's supposed to have an emotional impact on the storytelling, especially with Tally. And even though they attempt to create that mood, it never lands, simply just for the lack of interaction that we get with Paris. And since this film is called Uglies, and the premise supposes that a segment of society is flawed to the degree that they all need to be operated on, you'd think that the actors would be made up to be unattractive. But they're not. I mean, most of the people we see who are considered ugly aren't in the slightest. Now, you may not find some of them personally attractive, but I was hard-pressed to find anybody in the cast that was in need of work. And I do like how that plays into the commentary of the story. The world has been convinced that they're unworthy unless they're polished and perfect, negating the natural beauty that they possess. And again, it creates that caste system that the entire program was purported to eradicate. That's probably the most clever part of the film and the storytelling. I mean, it's executed in a blatant and straightforward manner, but also not pushed into our face that screams, look, these uglies are actually pretty. I mean, we just get to watch the vacillation of the emotions as people struggle with their own self-worth after a lifetime of being told that they were less than. Now, something that left me a little perplexed when the film concluded was that this isn't a complete story. The novels contain at least 4 volumes, and this is just the first. The way the narrative ends, sort of a cliffhanger. I mean, one of the arcs is completed, which I thought was nice, but the story's still left wide open for so much more. And it really needs it. I mean, since this took something like 3 or 4 years to finish production on the first movie, how long are we going to have to wait for the next installment? I'm intrigued and invested in the characters and their arcs, and while I wasn't completely sucked into the world and its concepts at first, it did end up growing on me. I mean, there's still issues where character development is concerned, desperately needing to have some background fleshed out. And even though the plot structure is predictable and simple, this can be a fun, casual watch that contains a deeper message if you choose to engage with it. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and some violence. I give Uglies 3 out of 5 couches. Now, there's certainly room for improvement in the next installment, but it looks like they've got a good foundation to start from. Only time's going to tell. All right, so do you have a favorite dystopian film or maybe book? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.